This is the, this is the One Source Communications webinar pre-show banter. So we're live waiting for our webinar to start. Just having some kind of casual conversations until we get to the Tales from the Cyber Vault that'll be starting here in about 10 minutes or so. So if you have any thoughts or questions that you want to ask myself or Chris or Garrett, then put those in the questions and we'll get to those as we have this pre-show banner. So guys, what is on store for Thanksgiving?
Family time. That's for me. We've got most of the family in town this year. The first time that everybody moved out to North Carolina. So we're hosting the big events at our house and doing all the turkey and the sides and the whole spread.
Who's cooking the turkey?
My wife's mother will be doing all the sides, and my dad, he said he claims the turkey.
He's doing a fried turkey, fried?
Brined and roasted, not fried.
Okay.
So
Okay, should be pretty good. Cool.
Garrett?
So Saturday we have our Friendsgiving with all of our friends.
Oh, Friendsgiving, that's.
We're doing golf beforehand and then a Thanksgiving dinner after, and then
Where do you go?
this time we're going just to the Force in Sanford because that's where our friends that are hosting are. They're going to be in Sanford, so Force is right down the street from them.
Nice.
So yeah, we're gonna do that, and then for actual Thanksgiving, I don't know. Our families will tell us the night before what we're doing. So
Well, for us, we got kids coming in. All my kids from they're in college. They're all actually coming back in. So we'll have a big Thanksgiving with all the kids back home and see if we can get everybody pushed into one house to have a Thanksgiving. I'm sure come Friday we'll be ready to part ways.
Oh, yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably won't happen. No, it's family time as well. It's good to have it this time of year. We're looking forward to it. Want to have some good fun and fellowship with friends and family. So,
All right, I got one. This is an important one.
okay.
When does Christmas season start? Has it already for you, or are you a December or a November 25th, day after Thanksgiving?
We are at our house. We really are pretty fluid there.
Okay.
It really when it strikes the mood. I like to start listening to Christmas music like 2 weeks ago. Like I like Christmas music. Okay. I mean, shoot me. So I'm already getting into the Christmas spirit, but the decorations and all that stuff is really how well my wife feels and how soon she wants me to start doing it after Thanksgiving. We typically don't do it before Thanksgiving. It is after Thanksgiving, but yeah, that's how it works. So that's how I feel.
it is strictly on the 25th. Thanksgiving is just one of my big holidays because I love food. And, kind of with the family and stuff, and I feel like it never gets its fair share, so I don't even mention Christmas until after. I make sure Thanksgiving is well celebrated, and then whenever I wake up from my food coma the next day, I'm ready to go for Christmas.
So we have two rules in our house, that there is no mention of Christmas before my wife's birthday, which is in early November, right? So
Okay.
we got past that, and now we can start the planning process. Music has hit the stereo a couple of times, and then the decorations are the weekend after Thanksgiving. So we'll do Friday, Saturday, Sunday, getting the house ready, putting up the lights, and have that all ready and headed into December.
Okay. Pivotal question here. Let's see if you get the answer right. Real tree or fake tree?
Here in North Carolina, it's a fake tree.
Oh, no.
Because I grew up on the West Coast, and if I cannot have a Douglas fir, then it's not a real Christmas tree to me. Like the Douglas fir is the perfect Christmas tree. You can't get them out here.
There are other trees you can get.
I
that
know, but
represent
they're
as
not
well
as,
as the Douglas fir.
yeah, I know, Fraser
Okay.
fir and
All
stuff.
right.
It's not.
Wrong
it's
answer.
not
How
the
about
same.
you, Garrett?
I gotta go with the real tree because I have to have the smell.
The
There's nothing better than
smell
smell
is
of
it,
Christmas
right?
tree.
I mean, and I have to say, the experience of putting up a fake tree with the lights already on, I mean, that's pretty impressive. And it's something, especially with the new trees that have the LED lights that you can do all the cool gadgets and blinking lights on and off, all that kind of stuff. I can see the attraction to doing that, but the smell, you gotta have a real tree, and that just makes Christmas, right?
The year before last, there was a place in Durham that was selling trees. It was just outside of Durham, but you could pay extra, and after you picked your tree, they would go ahead and wrap it in lights before you put it in your car.
Oh, good.
Nice. That's
And it
I'm-
was a very popular business
I'm
model.
sure it was. They sold a lot of lights.
Oh, yeah,
They just put them on something and hooked up, spinning.
Yep.
And done, right?
yep, that's
Hey,
what we did.
that's
That's
beautiful,
clever.
beautiful. Yeah, I say that I have to be honest here. My wife may watch it sometime. I say I love a real tree, but we put in for that fake tree. I've got some smell stuff that you can spray that makes it smell like a real tree because it,
Yeah,
well, for the last couple
those.
of years, it's been a fake tree. I'm sorry. I just went against what I said. A real tree though, it's an effort,
Yeah.
right? But what's cool is if you go, and you probably have them here too, but if you go to the western part of the state where they have the Christmas tree farms and have them go out and go walk around and pick one and they come and cut it, and that's a pretty cool experience. Especially with
I love
kids.
the UCAT.
Yeah,
And the kids love and going and picking
Yeah.
one. We always try and pick one that has a great front view, but a little bit Charlie Brown in the back, because then you get a discount.
yeah, exactly. Always looking.
Fit nice in the corner too.
Exactly, yeah. Put them in a corner and they look perfect.
For sure.
But, yeah, it's sad for me because UCUT here in the Raleigh area is, South Carolina sapphires and like you get some firs, but they're just not the same. It's too warm here.
Yeah.
And so like if you're gonna do UCUT here, you're not getting a Christmas tree. You're getting a tree that you set up at Christmas time. It's just not the same. So I'm so spoiled coming from Washington State. The trees are just so much better. Yeah. I'm a tree snob. I can't help
Okay,
it.
it sounds like it. It sounds like it. All right, so, we have to deal with what we got there. So tell me, we've got a few minutes here before we get started on the real live, webinar. What about things going on technology-wise, security-wise? What's piquing your interest these days that has got you looking up things, doing research on the internet as of late?
Actually, I was looking at stuff this morning, within the past week or so, they've released a bunch of different decrypting tools for a bunch of different ransomwares. So that's nice that we're finally starting to see, a good breakthrough in that of just, get defense for decrypting software, because sometimes the decryption software is not the best.
Without a doubt, we've seen that firsthand, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, half the time it doesn't run or it runs so slowly, you're better off restoring some backups anyway.
Yep, we're gonna talk about that for sure.
For me, I actually like to study the entrance points and see the trends on, is it phishing? Is it exposed servers? Is it spear phishing and targeted attacks? Like, what are the trends in how the threat actors are getting into the environment? To me, that's the most interesting part to research because, that's your front line of defense. If you can hold that front gate, you got a better chance of getting through it.
So Chris's fetish is initial compromise. What's yours, Jared? What's your ransomware fetish?
I have to say it's initial compromise too. I
Oh,
really
really?
like
Okay.
researching that, and I feel like in the actual investigative process, that's the part I love finding out the most. How they got in and where that can be fixed.
Cool. Interesting, all phases interesting, obviously, but I kind of like the lateral movement and trying to figure out, or understanding where the attackers are being created in order to spread ransomware, get through the network, do their discovery, all those sorts of things, because those are usually places, a lot of times where triggers are thrown, right? Initial compromise, if they can get on, maybe it's 0 day, maybe it's phishing URL that hasn't been classified yet, whatever the case may be. But a lot of the techniques they use once they get in are, tried and true techniques that we've seen, and we can pivot. We can see those, see them pivoting, and it's kind of neat to see that. So, all right. Well, we're real close to our time. I guess we'll go ahead and get started.
You want to give it we'll give it a minute. Let's make sure people.
Okay. Well, yeah, we can do that. We
got one more.
We got another minute. So, outside of that, what other things are piquing your interest? I did see an article today of a new ransomware called Moses Land or something like that. That's a ransomware that encrypts but never asks for a ransom.
It's an interesting business model.
So yeah, I'm trying to figure out what's the purpose there, right?
Some people just like to watch the world burn.
Maybe it is. I think that's got to be it. We got to the stage now that people are just saying, it's too much trouble for me to collect money. I just want to encrypt stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, something to be said for a ransomware group that just wants to encrypt and stuff and not I guess they're not really a ransomware group at that time, right?
No,
I guess even, you really can't call it ransomware.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, they're not ransom.
You truly say.
destructiveware. We need a new name.
Yeah, malware.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Malware, malware.
Yeah.
Well, for some reason, I saw the article, I think it was on Legal Computer, I saw the article labeled as new ransomware that doesn't ask for, specific, ransom. It just doesn't do it. Somebody said terrorist. Yep, could be. I guess they're all considered to a degree terrorists from that standpoint, when they're executing their malware, their terrorists, their malware or their ransomware, whatever the case may be.
We're at 2. You want to dive right in?
Yeah, we're just a minute after 2. All right, so we'll get started here. This is our first of many tales from the Cyber Vault. We're going to talk through today some real world events we've been in, scenarios for ransomware. Ransomware is going to be the highlight here just because that's so prevalent in the environment, in the industry, and you see it everywhere. We're going to talk through some of those and from 3 different aspects. So the goal here today really is to share and talk about things proactively that organizations can do to better protect themselves from ransomware. We're going to give the bad and the good today. And so we want to talk through all those aspects. We'll be sharing TTPs we saw from threat actors. We'll be sharing initial compromise or fetish. We'll talk about that a little bit. We'll be sharing some takeaways about things that practically you and your organization can do to better protect you from ransomware. All that in this jam-packed hour of fun, fantastic things. So my name is Steve Cobb. I'm the CISO for OneSource. We're a managed security service provider, managed IT service provider as well. And we are coming to you live from one of our security operations center, which is actually a bank vault. And so pretty cool. We protect you. We protect you so much. We're in a daggone bank vault protecting you. So take that, terrorists, or whatever. But that's where we're coming from. Today, I have 2 special guests with me. Chris Hope, who's our Senior Director of IT and Security Services, and Gary Luce, who's one of our security analysts. So I'll let them introduce themselves, and you can tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Chris Hope, Senior Director of IT and Security with OneSource. Been here a little over 2 years with the company, based here in Raleigh, North Carolina. And my responsibility is overseeing our IT and Security Services group. So OneSource is primarily a services provider. We do services in telecom, IT and security, and my areas are IT and security. So we've got onboarding teams, support teams, engineering teams across both the IT services line and the security services line.
And I'm Garrett. I'm a SOC analyst here at OneSource. I've been here just over a year now, and I'm just essentially going to be your front line of defense, for the security services. So as soon as alerts come in, I'm seeing those monitoring systems. Pretty much just keep an eye out for bad guys.
Yep, you are the first line of defense.
Oh yeah,
You're the firefighter for sure.
that's right.
So we want to talk a little bit about data breaches, and obviously ransomware is the most prevalent data breach that we see out today. In fact, a recent study IBM's done about the cost of a ransomware attack these days has gone up now to about $4.6 million. So imagine that if you're a small company or even a large company, a $4.6 million revenue hit is not something you want to go through, right? So we think about ransomware from the standpoint of always, do I pay the ransomware? Do I pay the ransom or not? And I think we want to talk a little bit more about consequences and attenuating circumstances that happen after ransomware. If you pay the ransom, maybe you get a decryptor that works, or maybe you don't, right? We talked about that a little bit. But then what happens after you decrypt everything? Let's say it does work and you decrypt everything. That's not the end of the story, right? Because your IT and staff have worked tirelessly for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Sometimes this is a 2 or 3 week endeavor. Surely your environment's changed, things have happened that you have to fix. It is a tremendous undertaking to try to cover up ransomware. And it's one of the reasons why we see so many existing companies that are hit with ransomware not survive, right? The statistics are staggering about how many organizations do not recover from ransomware just because it's too costly for them. So we're going to talk through that today. Obviously, the COVID has played a role in this as well, because companies have gone more digital infrastructure, they've gone more remote work and work from home. A lot of companies have taken a shortcut, if you will. They've chosen connectivity and convenience over security. And now the attackers have an even riper platform to target and to exploit. So we're going to discuss today some real life ransomware battles we faced this year and the strategies we use in order to beat back those threat actors. We released some information, some PR stuff talking about how much we saved customers. We estimate that to be around, just a broad estimate, $100 million that we saved customers that from looking at Garrett and team doing such a great job of detecting and preventing attacks. We calculate those numbers over about 2 million attacks that we've done just this year in North Carolina for customers. We provide coverage for customers across the U.S. and even in some other countries. But we're in North Carolina. We're in one of our SOCs, and obviously one of our main missions is to make sure that businesses based in North Carolina are protected and defended and do as much as we can. So this is an interactive webinar. We want to converse with you. We want to get questions. We want to give your answers and feedback. But we're going to get started here talking about 3 instances we'll go through that specifically we were involved with around ransomware, what happened, and how they played out. So we'll go through this a little bit round robin for you all. I'm going to kind of talk through the introduction of the ransomware event. Garrett's going to talk about Frontline, what he saw, what the steps of the SOC 2 took, how they classified the ransomware, how they did the technical forensics for the ransomware. And then Chris is going to follow up with some practical tips that we give customers, and we want to give for just the general public out that you can do today that are a lot of them free, right? A lot of them just practical, good security behavior, things your company should be doing in order to protect yourself from that. All right, so let's talk through the first one. The first one was a company based in North Carolina, a large printing company, right? If I mention some of the online print companies, you know who they are. This company provides print for them. So they do the actual printing, actual merchandising. They have a large manufacturing facility. And so we were brought in because of an incident that occurred. They asked us to come in and help remediate that. The way that the story plays out, Thursday night, 10 o'clock, the last shift from the manufacturing plant leaves, everything's working fine. Right? We've shut that lights out, gone home, everything's great. The IT manager gets a call the next morning at 6 o'clock saying, we can't access anything, and there's some weird stuff printed out everywhere. And so come to find out, obviously, spoiler alert, this was ransomware, right? And so the organization had been affected by a devastating ransomware, affected all their infrastructure, and the ransomware actors had printed out the ransomware note on every printer in the facility. Now, mind you, I just said this is a printing company, so large format printers printed out. I mean, we had the ransomware note printed out everywhere. So
So I know they had it printed on a banner too, because they had a banner printer hooked up to the network. If you can get that banner, I would love to put it up here in the SOC.
Well, anyway, I'm not sure if that banner is still available, but it was very interesting that's what happened. So as we were brought in to figure out, kind of discover what's going on, we obviously looked at the ransomware note. The company had already been involved with the ransomware actor. They were texting back and forth on phone, negotiating with the ransomware actor. Ransom initially was about $750,000. Now this is a large company, but $750,000 was a hard hit to their bottom line. So they were negotiating back and forth with ransomware actors, and eventually the negotiations stopped. The ransomware actor just was like, done. I'm not going to talk to you anymore. And kind of that's where we called in our forensics team, called in our team to try to help remediate, take care of things, and kick the attacker out and recover the environment for the customer. So Garrett, I'll pass it over to you, talk through some of the things that we saw, what we did, kind of the tactical pieces of it.
Sure, yeah. So one of the first things, whenever, the system's infected with ransomware, it really helps if you know the specific variety, because from there you kind of know their attack patterns, what to look for. This one was identified as Snatch, and it actually has a really interesting way of whenever it's first installed, it boots into safe mode, and that's how it really gets by stuff, because it'll go into safe mode where obviously your antivirus and stuff won't be running. It'll then whitelist its processes. The next time it reboots, it's pretty much invisible to Windows Defender. So from there, they got that initial host compromise, they deploy a group policy, across as a batch file, and essentially replicate this process for every machine in the system. And I mean, from there, it's pretty easy for them to just go in and just lock everything down.
Yeah. When we think about initial compromise for this one, did we figure out the initial compromise for this event?
This one, I believe it was a dev server that they spun up. And I want to say it was over the internet, and so they just managed to brute force RDP, which is a pretty common tactic for ransomware. Especially now, during COVID and stuff, people just kind of spinning these up for their customers and clients and stuff. Pretty easy to brute force into them.
Well, yeah, and think about it too, as I said before, a lot of times these companies are trying to give access to employees that are now working from home, and I can go on my firewall and just open RDP up to this server and let you log in, and it's just like you're sitting here, right? And it sounds great, sounds fantastic, until. And so, the threat actor was able to brute force to get here and just kind of wipe out the environment, and it was pretty quick, if I remember, right? I mean,
It's within, a few hours they could go in, lock everything down. And this one, unfortunately, their backups are local, so they're able to even go in and encrypt backups. So that makes things, a much more difficult process to fix.
right, yeah, and so I think that's well, Chris is gonna hit on these, but what we're seeing attackers do now is they're trying to infiltrate every aspect of the business infrastructure. Cloud, right? People think they can put their stuff to the cloud and they're safe, and that's not really true, right? And you don't have the right, it's just another site, right?
It's just somebody else's computer. It's my favorite cloud quote. It's just somebody else's computer.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so, Chris, what are the takeaways here? What do we do for this customer, in order to help them? Obviously, the event already happened. We help try to clean things up. What's the takeaways here for them?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. The one that I really want to start with is there is no easy button to recovery. Regardless of what you plan, how good your BCDR is, how much you plan ahead for an event, there is no magic wand and you're back up and running. For this company, it was a multi-week recovery, restoring from backups that had been synced to the cloud. Fortunately, they did have cloud sync backups, air gap backups, where they took backups locally, their primary copy was locally, but a stale copy was synced to the cloud. So able to pull those down. One of the challenges was, they're a company that does not typically need high bandwidth.
Mm-hmm.
They are not a high throughput organization. They only need internet for business transactions. So they didn't have a high performance fiber circuit to be able to pull down terabytes of cloud backups to get their systems up and running the same day. So it's days or weeks worth of pulling data down from the cloud in order to get everything recovered.
Yeah.
As far as takeaways for how do we not get into this situation in the first place, EDR, which is endpoint detection and response. That's the number one takeaway for this customer. And really for pretty much every business that we talk to, that is going to be the number one option that we're going to recommend. And what that gives you is that gives you an agent that runs on every single endpoint. That's servers, laptops, workstations, anything within your perimeter is going to run the software. And it's going to watch for known behaviors as well as things that are suspicious and not necessarily in a virus database. And that's what really separates EDR
So
from traditional AV.
I mean, most people say, and in fact, even some of the regulatory checklists you have to do now say, do you have AV? I mean, that's an easy checkbox to check, right?
Yeah, so AV is okay, right? There's nothing wrong with AV. It's a good step in the process, but AV is designed around signatures.
Right.
So it has to be a known malware variant. It has to be something that's already has a signature published, and it has to operate in a way that's similar enough that it can be detected. So as we get these ransomware as a service organizations out in the wild, what they'll do is they'll tweak the parameters slightly, they'll tweak the file hashes, they'll tweak the names. And so now they're trying to change it so that it flies under the radar of the traditional AV signature. EDR takes it to the next level. It goes for heuristic analysis, it goes for behavioral analysis, and the response part is it gives you the ability to step in and prevent spread from that machine output. You might not be able to prevent the attack on machine number one, but you can dang well prevent machine number one from getting to 2 to 3 to 4 and so on throughout the org. And that's really the power of EDR, is the ability to contain it at the lowest possible impact. You talked about RDP to the internet, like that's a
Don't do
no-brainer.
it.
Just don't do it.
Don't do it.
There's no
Please,
justification
Don't do it.
for ever putting yourself in that kind of position. It is too easy to breach. It is too easy to attack. It is too easy to brute force. Put it behind a VPN, put it behind a firewall. You know, that even if you have to open it up to a single IP for, you know, your offshore developer, at least you've got it restricted by source IP, but even better, put it behind a VPN. There's just no excuse for that. And then the other thing that we saw with this one that really became important is isolate your admin accounts to admin activities. So the user in question that we were working with, the system admin for this company, he used his normal user to perform all of his IT admin functions. So when his machine was touched and they dumped the creds from his machine, now they've got domain level access from the local machine credentials that he uses every single day. And that's just the easy button to spread when you're talking about threat actor behavior. If they can get admin credentials, you're just making their life so much easier. So containing the admin credentials to admin functions only. If he had a user account that he used on his machine and an admin account that he only used for server and AD admin access, now he doesn't have cache credentials sitting on his machine that can be pulled and downloaded with Mimikatz, right? So now you've got isolation, you're making it harder for the threat actors to get that pivot and escalation.
And great takeaways. I think that the admin access is one that's a common theme. People do it, once again, convenience, right? It's easier for me to just use my one account to do everything, but that is a place where it leaves you at tremendous risk for that very reason across the organization, right? Those domain admins, we want to have that list to be very small and it be a unique account that you only use for administrative functions.
Absolutely. And that's a recommendation that companies of any size can implement.
Sure.
Right? We're not asking
That's
them
free,
to,
right?
yeah, we're not asking you to invest in expensive software or systems. You can do that as any size business right now today for free.
Free practical steps. Here, like I said, we're giving away free practical steps to do. These are things you can do in your organization today that will help you better reduce your risk and protect your environment. All right, so let's move on. We got another instance where we were brought into a company as a large biopharmaceutical company that noticed things happening in their environment. And while the engagement, or while we were asked to come in to the environment, things started getting encrypted and ransomware was launched in the environment. As we got in and we're working with the company, we see as and I'll let you talk about this some, Garrett, but I think there was some hand-to-hand combat going on here with the attacker, right? So while we were there, the attacker was still there, and so there was things that we could see going on in real life. And so we kind of brought into this one a little bit in process. The attacker staying in the environment after the ransomware was already pushed out. Interesting. Let's talk about that in a second, about why a ransomware actor may do such a thing. But then what we come to find out is there was offline backups that were extremely old. So if they had to pivot to those, then they were having to go back and redo work. I mean, consider your recovery time and your recovery point objectives. You talk about backup and how far back you have to go to recover. This company had a huge virtualization environment, so this attacker was sophisticated enough to get on the virtualization environment and encrypt that as well. And so that's devastating for a company when attackers can get one place and just start encrypting hundreds of machines because they're all in one environment. And so this is one where they had a small IT staff. They really didn't have a security expert on staff, but this IT staff, God bless them, worked as hard as they could. This is a case where they were spending the night in the data center, ordering pizza in to eat, all while they're trying to rebuild and get things working back. But as we found out as we got in, the attack was still there, and there was some interesting things wrong. So Garrett, you want to talk to that?
Yes, so I mean, with your description, it sounds like it's this big, sophisticated, attack, but really this one all came from a user being phished in an email. It's an admin user, so once they got those credentials, it's easy access. And a big thing with, phishing that is easy to prevent is just, have security in layers, have your multi-factor activated. Like that probably was a good chance I could have stopped that right there, just that one layer. So IT admin phishes his credentials. From there, they can get in to their system. And obviously with an admin account, easy to spread through. Like you were saying, while we were in the environment, we're trying to figure out what accounts have been compromised, where the attackers, what they've touched, what they've done, and we would notice, an admin account that wasn't supposed to be there. So we delete the account. We won't start looking, come back a couple minutes later, that account would be there again. Or we would notice the password get changed kind of while we're looking at it. So at that point, the attacker's in the system, and from there you can try to figure out where they're coming in from and go ahead and contain that as quickly as possible.
Why, from your experience here, why would the attackers stay in the environment after ransomware was deployed? Right, the ransomware's done, right, they've executed their mission, but we still saw that attacker there. Why do you think that was going on?
Well, one reason, if they're trying to turn it into a botnet to attack other computers, great use of resource and power. Another one's just finding as much information as they can. So most of the time, they're not there to just encrypt your data. They're there to take it too, and then you can easily sell it. Especially if you have, any customer data, any private information, stuff like that. That goes for big money on the darknet.
Sure does. We've seen more and more public auctions happen for data that's been exfiltrated from a ransomware event, more so than ever before. And that's a thing now, right?
That's a big trend in the industry.
It's a common thing. So, Chris, as we think about this instance, what were some key takeaways or things that we could tell other companies to consider that will protect this company potentially?
Yeah, so when we come into an environment that's I won't use the B word. We don't use the breach word, but mid-incident, one of the first things that we got to do is we've got to get the attacker out, right? And the number one first thing that you're going to do is you're going to drop access to the internet. Cut it off, right? Unplug the firewall if you have to, or just create a rule set on the firewall that restricts it to, hey, I'm going to allow my EDR software to talk out. I'm going to allow my remediation team to talk in, nothing else. I don't do Google, I don't do email. We are shut down until we are confident this attacker is out. And then we go through a process called an enterprise password reset, where we methodically, through the entire environment, we go through and we either disable accounts or we flag them for password change required, which means that they cannot be logged into until the password's changed. We reset by hand every single privileged account, administrator account, and we also do in Microsoft Active Directory, we do a golden ticket reset as well, which is a KRB-TPT, which is the signing authority for Kerberos. And if you can steal that password from AD, which is pretty easy to do if you have unlimited access to domain controller, pretty easy to steal, then you can sign your own tickets as if you authenticated to AD without ever authenticating. So changing that twice, which is required to actually make it take effect, is another step that is required for getting the attacker out of the environment, making sure that the credentials that they've been using throughout the attack are invalidated, and that we know that they do not have access moving forward. Now, how do you get back to business operations after that enterprise password reset? I mean, you're talking about things like two-factor authentication, right? In this case, the IT admin was phished, right? It happens. Humans are not perfect. They're going to make mistakes. Maybe this is, a credential reuse. Maybe this is just somebody got tricked. It happens, right? But whatever the case may be, we have to plan for people making mistakes. If our system fails on the first human error, we've let ourselves down. So how do we prevent that? Two-factor. We make sure that every time we're escalating our own access, every time I'm doing an admin function, that I have to get that two-factor thing to my phone. I have to say, yes, this is actually me logging into this privileged system. And that's the best and strongest way to prevent credential stealing. Because you know that, hey, I just got a ping on my phone that I tried to log into AD. I'm not logging into AD right now. I got a big problem right now.
No doubt.
And that can stop an incident in its tracks just by that one simple solution. We talked about it with the first incident, but separate admin accounts, right? Creating that separation of privileged access from regular access makes it that much harder for the attackers to spread throughout the environment, makes it that much harder for them to get their mission done. And then being careful about what you sync to your cloud services. In this case, the attacker pivoted into their Office 365 environment, did a lot of damage there because one of the credentials that they picked from AD was a global admin in Office 365. And so separating your responsibilities across different accounts having different permissions at the level that you need them, and not just one admin account that does everything. You know, I've been an admin for an enterprise business before, and it's really easy to fall into that mindset of, I got my one
Sounds
account.
like you're raining on my parade, Chris. I want to be able to quickly do the work I need to do, and 2 or 3 accounts just doesn't help me there, right?
I'm not gonna lie, it is more of a headache for the IT admin.
Yeah.
But you're making that trade to say, I will take on the responsibility of owning a couple accounts to better serve my business, to
Right.
better protect my business.
Right.
Right, if by doing that, I help my business be in a position to make it harder for the attacker to be successful, or to give us time to respond with our EDR software and prevent an attack from spreading before they have what they need to move laterally through the environment, that's what you need. You need that delay. You need enough time to see it, catch it, and respond to it before you're SOL.
And I think the idea there that, I like what you said there. I think what's got to happen in a lot of organizations today is this needs to be part of responsibilities that IT admins, security professionals take on, right?
Yeah.
It's a different world now. Having one account or using the default administrator account is just, you're not living up to your responsibilities anymore, right? And
Right.
You're put in a position by an organization to take care of that organization, just like the physical security guard, just like the comptroller and other people, they have responsibilities. These are a set of responsibilities that in the world we live in today, someone's got to accept and take as part of your job.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we get through the idea there for this company, and the attacker got in and did all kinds of devastating work, and we saw it in process, I want us to pivot now and think and talk a little bit about a win, right? A success story. We've kind of been long, it's a little devastating here, some of the things we talked about, and just to recap, these incidents were devastating to these organizations. One of them still recovering from the act, but luckily and thankfully they're both still in business, because we've seen a lot of business close. But let's talk through an example where we got a win, right? We were able to help, and I won't use the B word either, but at any time an incident, we can minimize the impact. I think that's one of the things we want to share here today as well, is that any managed security company, or any person's a security vendor telling you they've got the silver bullet, they've got the thing that will protect you 100% of the time, run from those people. Just as fast as you can, run from them. We never want to tout the idea that we can protect somebody 100%. It's not possible. Just can't happen, right? But the goal should be that we minimize those impacts, that when you are compromised or breached, that the impact is so small that your incident report is 1 page versus 100 pages, right? So I've seen the 100 pages ones, they're not good. Not good things. The 1 page ones are much better, because things get wrapped up. You can assign an amount of impact to that, but you can still walk away the next day and come in and everything's good. So let's talk through an example where we got a win. So this was a large Eastern U.S. Automobile conglomerate. They've got a lot of dealerships. They do everything you can think about in the automotive world, from selling cars, but also refurbishing cars, fixing cars, repair, all that stuff. They've got a huge organization, a huge operation in the eastern part of the United States. And so we had an incident happen, right, where an alert was triggered, and it was after hours. So you think about in this business.
And I think it's important to mention, Steve, we provide this company EDR services,
Yeah,
as well as a couple of things, but mostly what we're going to be talking about today in this is EDR. So we've deployed the endpoint agent on their machines,
Right.
and those alerts come back to our SOC. I think
right.
that's important context for everything else.
No doubt, it's great. And once again, as we talked about layer security, you mentioned that we provide managed endpoint security for this customer, but also email and network as well. The idea of layered approach, and we can see things from a multifaceted perspective, is critical. So yes, this is one of our customers we provide managed security for, and managed SIEM on the back end as well. And so an alert trigger went to our SOC, went to Garrett's team after hours, and it was a computer that we discovered was not a back office computer, but a shop computer, a computer that a technician may use, or parks, or whatever the case may be, within the office. So as we see here what happens after hours, one of the things we've talked about and this will be a takeaway Chris, I'm sure will bring up, is the idea of, hey, you may have great tools, but who's watching, right? What happens when alert fires? So I'm gonna, from there, transition to you, Gary. Let you speak about kind of what happens for one source when we provide security services for a customer, but hopefully what other MSPs are providing for their customers as well, and kind of what that looks like.
Sure. So with this particular one, I want to say the alert came in around 9 or 10 o'clock at night. So it's definitely after hours, especially, for a business like that. They're usually at 9 to 5, 9 to 7 at best.
Right.
So the alert comes in 9 or 10, and I want to say it was an alert that Mimikatz had been downloaded on the machine and was running, looked like it was dumping credentials. So you see Mimikatz on the machine, that's an immediate red flag. So, from there, it starts escalating to the team. We start contacting, hey, whoever's up right now, probably need help with this. So get the team together, contact the SOC manager, we come up with a plan. We try to contact the customer. It's after hours though, so we don't get an answer, probably in bed at this point. So we make the call, go ahead and contain this machine. We know it's Mimikatz, we know it's bad. There's nothing good going to come from this. It's kind of a tough call because,
Yeah, what does that look like? What are we considering from those standpoints when we make potentially a business impacting decision, right?
So with this one, we knew it had the potential to be business impact because, based on hosting for computer, especially a place like this, you got a general idea of where this computer's gonna be located.
Right.
So it could say, floor, room, shop, or whatever.
Right.
With its name, we had an idea it's probably gonna be a critical machine. Come tomorrow morning, someone's gonna need to use this computer. But knowing that we don't get, any contact from, their team, we call them, try to let them know, like, hey, this needs to be locked down. Knowing that how bad the threat was, we just went ahead and made that call. We locked it down. We started getting forensics on the machine, trying to figure out how this came to get on the computer, why it's running. I believe that later, I want to say it ended up being phishing, that's how they ended up getting on that computer. But yeah, the big thing with this one was, that not all companies, can have a 24/7, IT or security team on staff. So that's where we come in. We will be that team for you.
Yeah.
And so, like with this, we'll make the call if we need to.
Yeah, and so this is a managed security customer for one source. How in the world did we allow Mimikatz to get dropped onto a computer? That seems like a failure.
So it's not necessarily a success, but luckily, like we were talking about, we had layers that, as soon as this computer alerted, we were able to contain it. So it stayed on this particular layer. It didn't go out through any of the other ones of the system. There would have been, possibly could have been ways that we could have seen a little bit sooner another layer. So there were probably potentially points of failure before. But the point is that it got to this one and then it stopped.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's the reinforcement there that I'd say is that, as we talked about, your tool may not work. You got to be prepared with multiple layers, right? Your tool may not work. This could have been a computer that was just installed and we hadn't got an order to install the EDR on it or been installed on it yet, right?
Yeah.
This could have been a laptop that somebody brought into the office one day and their kids were using for remote schoolwork. We've seen that happen, right? The kids working for remote schoolwork clicks on a link that they shouldn't, and now this is connected to the corporate network. There's a potential breach. So there's all kinds of opportunities that threat actors have. I think the saying is something like that, the threat actor's only got to be right one time. We've got to be right every time. And you're just not going to be right every time. That's why we put those multiple layers in place, right? That's why, if an email got through for phishing and maybe they used a credential harvester on a legitimate OneNote or one link page or out in the public internet, that may not flag from an email security standpoint, right? And so that's why we put those layers in place so we can eventually see that, right? Yeah. Chris, what are your thoughts here, takeaways for that one? It's a win, right? I mean, for me, I said a failure, but ultimately it's a success because although this was an incident, we contained it to one box, and that's what we were trying to do, right? That is a win, and the customer thought that was a win too, especially after knowing that Mimikatz leads to ransomware.
Yeah,
like 100% of the time, that environment, that large environment, was going to be ransomed probably pretty soon.
Once that's on the computer, that can be
Yeah.
So I mean, you think about the pattern that a threat actor goes through when they're trying to attack an environment, right? So you've got to have your initial compromise. In this case, it's a fish. It's human error, right? People make mistakes. It happens. You cannot prevent 100% of human mistakes. Don't try. It's good to train people, but it's not possible to prevent 100%. So build the layers behind the people that help give you the knowledge and the ability to respond if something does happen. And more than if, when something does happen. Because let's be honest, for most companies, if you exist on the internet, if you do digital transactions of any kind, if you have internet service for your employees, you will be a target. It's not an if, it's a will. You will be a target to it. It's how you respond to it that matters. And thinking about this company, their IT administrator, their main guy, he works 9 to 5. He is not there after hours, and threat actors know that.
Yep.
They do their research. They say, this is an American company with these business hours. I'm going to attack them outside of these business hours. And there's a very good reason for that, because they're hoping that nobody's paying attention. They're hoping that they can get their job done overnight when nobody's watching the alerts. Now, in this case, we were watching the alerts, so we had the ability to step in and respond. But for a lot of businesses that try and do this themselves without the support of a service organization, they can't afford to staff 24/7.
Right.
They can't afford to put people in a SOC and to say, I'm going to hire a team of 8, 12 people and ask them to watch the alerts 24/7, 365. It's not financially viable for them to do that by themselves. But working with an organization like ours, we can provide them that service. We can be that backstop for them and see that alert even when they're asleep in bed.
Right.
You know, threat actors are going to take the time to research, to figure out how to attack your environment effectively. So thinking about where you can create layers of protection in your own environment. Things that we've already talked about, separation of privileges, putting things behind VPN, two-factor authentication, having multiple different layers where you can stop an attack at the endpoint, at the network, at the firewall, at, you know, finding things in the logs. You know, log analysis was one of those things that is extremely powerful in detection and response. A lot of companies save their logs.
Yeah.
Very few that actually look at them to figure out, is there something
Yeah.
suspicious going on here? So adding in those layers of protection, where can I put those gates that help contain an incident to the smallest possible radius? That's what really makes the biggest impact in preventing a full-blown compromise.
Right.
Because you'll never prevent every single incident, but how small can you keep that?
Yeah, that's right. That's what you minimize.
Yep.
What else? What about for other things in this? Let me ask you, Garrett, from the standpoint of the SOC, you know, sometimes that's a dirty job. Let's say right. Sometimes it's a dirty job. But what is it? What are the feelings like, or what are the thoughts for a SOC analyst when you can get a win like this? Right. I mean, is it the kind of the thrill of the engagement with the threat actor that you feel like you won or overcome in that standpoint, or what do you think there?
Well, unfortunately, any good day in the SOC is really boring. But you know, it's a good day. But I mean, coming from before this, you know, I actually worked in the ER, and I mean, it's kind of a similar thing. You know, you're sitting there, everything's fine, then all of a sudden an emergency happens. And so, you know when you have a team that's competent, they know what they're doing, and y'all are all there to like solve the same problem. And especially whenever you can get it solved as quickly as we do, it really does feel like, you know, you gotta win.
Yeah.
You know, we fall in an interesting position here with OneSource because we get to see both sides of it.
Right.
We get to see the ones that don't become fires. You know, it's an ember burning, but we put it out before it's a raging wildfire. And we get to see the ones where it's already burned thousands of acres before we get brought in. So having seen both interactions and worked with companies in both positions, to me, that being able to stomp out the ember, it's a small act, but I know what it would have turned into. I've seen the other side of the fence. I know what it looks like when that wildfire catches. And it's very personally gratifying for me to be able to save companies from going through that, to be able to prevent the pain, anguish, and financial hardship that would have happened.
Yeah. And you know, as I said, would have happened for sure. It's just a natural progression for a threat actor, what we saw here. Let me ask real quick, and we're gonna we've gone through those 3 scenarios. We're open to questions. So if you have questions, post them in the chat. We'll be glad to talk through those and answer those. But I do have another question as well around we talked about some practical, tactical steps, let's say EDR or other things. What about from a business prepared standpoint, right? So the idea of having an instant response, or the idea of knowing when the wildfires are burning, who is it I'm going to call, right? What are your thoughts there? What would we tell a potential client or just an organization that's looking for some guidance on, they're scared, they don't want ransomware to hit them? From that standpoint, what kind of knowledge would you share?
Yeah, I'll take the first run at this, and, we talked about it briefly in the last group, but the reality is it's not if anymore. The state of the world has changed. It's not if you're going to be targeted and attacked, it's when. So prepare for that inevitability, because it is now. It is no longer a possibility. It is no longer a maybe. It is no longer a could happen to me. It is a will happen. So what steps have you taken to prepare for that when it does? Do you have a business continuity plan? Have you validated and tested your backups? Do you have a disaster recovery plan for not just your IT, but also business operations? How do you allow people to work when you're having to rebuild your entire environment from scratch? God forbid, but if you get a ransomware incident that goes full blown and you're down, you have nothing left and you are recovering from last week's backups, how do you keep your business operational? How do you not only cash flow through to get to the other end of it to continue business operations, but how do you let your people, your business personnel, your accounting team, your finance team, your salespeople, what can you give them to be able to do their job successfully? I mean, that's not an easy thing to figure out, and it is specific to your market, your business, your needs. So spending the time now, planning, putting that into a paperwork version of, here's my plan, here's who I call, here's who I work with, here's my incident response team, here's who I call for firefighting, here's who I call for remediation. Knowing that ahead of time will save you a lot of time during the recovery stage.
And a lot of things.
Yes.
And a lot of stress.
Yes.
Without a doubt. Jared, you got anything to add to that?
I think a big thing that people, why, a lot of companies tend to not be as prepared is because the threat, isn't tangible. It's kind of unseen. Whenever you're your storefront, you're going to have a fire extinguisher, you're going to have sprinklers, you're going to know where to go if the building is on fire. But I mean, really, a ransomware attack can cause the same kind of damage. Your company is not going to exist tomorrow because it's going to be locked away. It's the same thing if it burns down overnight.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're going to plan for the physical type of things, you also have to plan for these as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, that people don't think it can happen to them, right? Especially see more and more smaller business, small, medium enterprise businesses, ones who've been in business for 10 or 15 years and say, it's never happened to me before. Why do I need to worry about it now? And the landscape has changed so much now, right? That exploits, vulnerabilities, phishing, all those kind of things come into play that are affecting more and more businesses.
Well, it's not just that too. Ransomware used to be a targeted attack, right?
Yeah.
It used to be, I am choosing this company and I'm going to go after them specifically with a targeted attack to compromise them. The landscape has changed. Threat actors are not spending that much time targeting one particular business anymore. Ransomware for service, which are threat actors who have created ransomware software and lease it out to other criminal organizations to use, has completely changed the threat landscape. Now, anybody can go and rent effectively a ransomware botnet and be like, hey, I want use of your software, I want use of your compute for the next 5 weeks. And I'm just going to shotgun this out to as many places as I can think of. And if I hit 2% of them, that's a big payday. Because they're not trying to spend weeks and weeks and weeks doing the research. They're like, how many people can I hit all at the same time?
It is definitely quantity, right? They're looking to take as many out as they can, as easily as they can. And so I think the other thing too, some of these practical, tactical pieces that we talk about putting in place will a lot of times avert a ransomware actor just to move on, right? They run into the first roadblock of, I don't have time for this, I'm going to move on. Two-factor authentication, a great example of that, right?
Yeah.
And leading right into that. So one of the questions we got is, what are some tactics and tools you would use to defend against a threat actor? And we talked about a bunch here, right? We talked about EDR, we talked about an email security product, something that is scanning for those things that can help you with it. Once again, nothing's 100%, but at least it knocks the number down. If you didn't have that, every email is malicious, right? Just about. I think the number's got to be close to 99%. Anyway, we want the numbers we are seeing.
Yeah.
Network security, breach detection, all those different pieces that we can put in place in order to try to help alert us to the presence or the attempt at an incident, right? What else? What else would you add?
I feel like another one that's often overlooked is the people aspect. So I mean, just training your staff.
Yeah.
Another service that we offer is, fish test and fish analyzing and stuff. So like, send out some simulated fish emails, and then, that way you can see specifically which employees or which divisions really need to focus on, hey, y'all are doing this, this is how it should be done.
Yeah, I think the three scenarios that we talked about today, two of those were fished, right?
Yeah.
And so if you can at least train your employees as much as aware as possible for them to be aware and suspicious, then you get another layer of security that doesn't cost you anything. It's just culture, behavior, right?
Yeah.
And human error is going to be human error. There's going to be those slip-throughs, but that's why you have that multi-layer effect. How about you, Chris?
Yeah, I would say the big things are tools, right? You gotta have competent tools, you gotta have tools that you trust to actually do the detection, to do the response. But then you've gotta have people in process is the other big part of it that companies tend not to think through. Buying the best EDR software on the market does not make you secure. Buying the best network security appliance on the market does not make you secure. Because who is watching those alerts? Do they know how to respond to them? Do they know what it means when they get an alert, how to investigate it, how to determine the risk, how to determine the threat? And do they know what actions they need to take to contain and eliminate the threat after that? It's a specialized skill set that requires intentional training that most IT administrators haven't had the opportunity to do. So it's more than just buying the pieces. It's also what people do you have operating that toolkit, and do they know what they're doing?
Yeah.
Do they know how to use the tools?
Right. Yeah, keep piece of it as well. Let's see, another question. What are specific strategies used in recovering from a data breach? So this is an interesting one. Specific strategies. Gary, you want to take a first stab at that one?
I mean, a good one is gonna be, backups that aren't connected to your main network. So, even if you only back up, once a week, it's just gonna help you. Like, yeah, you might have a week's worth of work that's lost, but I mean, it's a lot better than losing everything.
Yeah, that's a good one. How about Chris? And what else to add?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about the golden ticket reset, and I think that's one that unless you've been in the world of breach recovery, you probably have never heard of before, right? KRB TGT doesn't have big flashing name value like a lot of stuff, but it's incredibly important to think about if the threat actor had unlimited access to your environment, all the different things they could have touched. And how do I, one by one, systematically go through and close each of those holes? If they had my domain administrator account, then you have to assume they had your golden ticket password. So now that's on the checklist. If they had access to your Office 365, then you have to assume they had the ability to allow third-party apps behind the scenes, and you got to go and audit that, right? So each system, as you're going through the investigation and analysis phase, you have to look at, all right, if they had access here, then what does that mean for my remediation? What does that add to my checklist for recovery? And that process of going through it, hardening an environment and closing those doors and holes after an attacker has been in is time consuming. It's incredibly time consuming. A lot of the companies that we worked with who have been compromised and we're helping them remediate, we'll spend maybe 2 weeks getting the business recovered from a backup, VMs are running, business operations can continue standpoint, and we'll spend 5 to 6 months doing all of the cleanup that happens afterwards.
Yeah, all that hardening, posturing stuff that has to happen to make sure that threat actors don't come back again. Because that is one thing too we haven't touched on, but we've seen a lot of cases where there are repeat victims, right? Victims hit once or at a much higher rate to get hit again, especially if they don't put the right things in place to protect themselves.
Yeah, there's a bit of a myth right now that, okay, if I pay the ransomware and I decrypt back in business operations, I'm good, I'm done. They got you the first time.
Yeah.
What reason do you have to think that they're not going to come back 2 weeks from now?
Right.
And try again?
Exactly.
And it's crazy, but we see a higher incidence of repeat attacks from the same threat actor. You paid them, And they'll let you be for a little while. They'll let you feel like you're okay. And they'll come back a few weeks down the road and be like, hey, it's me again.
Yeah.
You know, we'll take some more money.
I think that's a great point too, to consider for companies who may say, I've got a great backup, I've had it air gapped, I can recover back to it, so I'm not gonna pay the ransom. One, you gotta worry about that exfiltration of data and that shameware that goes on today, right? And they still have something that might be damaging to the reputation of your business or intellectual property, other things that you want to get out. That's one piece. The second piece is, have you made sure that the threat actor is actually not still in your environment, right? Just because you recover from a previous snapshot or backup doesn't mean that threat actor hasn't infiltrated that or is not hiding in your backup system in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
So the idea should be, you've got to have some experts who know what they're doing and know what indicators to look like, know the TTPs of a threat actor, to make sure that if you recover, you've recovered safely and securely, and you can go about your business so they don't pick their head back up 2 weeks later and say, got you again, and you got to pay again. I think for me, one of the strategies too is to test out some of this that we talked about. If you have an organization where you have your own IT or security staff, or even if you have an employee in MSSP, like OneSource, test out some of these processes and procedures. And what I mean by that is do a tabletop exercise. Let's have a discussion. We do that for clients today where we come in and say, what happens if, right? Let's go through and say, let's go through the exercise and see that if somebody does click on a phishing link and a computer does get encrypted, what are we going to do? Who are we going to call? What are the steps we're going to take? A lot of times that leads to discussions about what are our crown jewels? Where is the data that we really care about? Where does it live? How are we protecting that? And to your point earlier, Chris, what happens if that gets ransomed or encrypted or we can't access it? How does our business function, right? Have we thought about going back to paper? Can we go back to paper, right? Can I get paper out and write it down? I mean, it's a consideration, right? But if you get a ransomware event and you're down for one of these extended period of time, it's a great question for you to ask yourself is, how long can I be down? And be honest with yourself. How long can you be down? Because that could be a reality for you if you don't take any steps. So get a good strategy and then practice a strategy. Understand what could happen and what you could do to respond to it. You do not want to be working this out in the middle of an incident. That is not the time to do an incident response plan. I want to make a banner for that somewhere that says an incident response plan should not be created during the incident. That's not
We'll
the
just
time.
tattoo that on your.
Yeah, I mean, that's, I need a tattoo here that says that. I can just hold it up and show you. So I think that's, we're winding down now. We've got a few minutes left. Don't see any other questions. So we're going to kind of wrap up here today. I'll get final thoughts from you two in just a second, but let me give the final notes here. So we will be emailing out a direct link for this. This has been recorded. We appreciate those of you who have joined us and spent your afternoon with us. Hope you got great information out of it. There was great information presented, so if you didn't get it, it's your fault. This time, at this point, it's on you. But think about those things that we brought up and how practically you could implement them in your environment and what the benefit would be for your organization. We also offer a free threat assessment, so it's a great way for you to discover, get a get a second set of eyes and look at your environment, see if there's things that we notice that you should be taking a look at, be concerned with, and we'll point those out for you. We do that for organizations all the time. And then if there's some other service or product or help that we provide, if it's just a consultation where you say, where do I start? That may be the biggest hurdle for some organizations is where do I start? Then reach out to us and let us know. We'll be glad to help you in whatever ways we can. So I'm going to get some final closing thoughts from both of you, and then we'll say our goodbyes and wrap up. Garrett, what do you think?
I think it was a great presentation.
Well, that's a little, I mean, you were
I
part
did
of
an
it.
awesome job. So.
Garrett was fantastic. I promoted out on LinkedIn that you were going to be fantastic, and
I had to live up to it.
yeah.
And I think, the big thing to take away is it's preparedness, because I mean, not use the scare tactic, but it's not if it's a win scenario. Odds are most companies, they're already being attacked. It's just some of the protocols they have now, are taking care of it, but they might not always. So just always be prepared.
Yeah, if you're going to take any one thing away from this, it's plan ahead, plan for the reality that this will be something you face. Have a plan, put the plan into practice, know what it is, work with your vendors, work with your partners, and practice, right? Because if you write the plan today and nobody looks at it for 2 years, and then you have a cybersecurity incident you're gonna be rusty. It's not gonna go smooth. A lot of companies that I've helped through this process, we recommend sitting down once a year, doing a tabletop exercise, practicing the incident response plan, because it's only through that practice that you know what the gotchas are.
Yeah.
You know where the failure points are. And so just pretend, make up a scenario and try it out and see what happens. And the first time it'll feel kind of silly, but you'll learn a lot.
Yeah.
And then the next time through, you'll learn even more. So it's worth the time to do it now and to put your business in a place to get through it successfully.
Yeah, and then you've got to just put the process in place where you're reviewing that, updating it, making sure it's appropriate for your environment, right? We have clients who pick up their incident response plan and look at it 2 or 3 years after not looking at it, and people have changed, names have changed, or, environments have changed, and it's almost as if not having one at that point. You really, if you're not gonna keep up and do the effort, keep it in so it's relevant and current, then you're doing yourself a disservice as well. When you put that effort in to do it in the first place, then it's not that difficult to repeat and just go through that process on an annual basis at least. So wrap up here. I don't see, let's see, I do see some questions that came up, but I can't see them now. So I'm not sure that I can bring this up.
If we didn't get to your question,
Yeah.
we'll go through the chat after the presentation and make sure we follow up with those individually.
Yeah, so I apologize for that, but we will try to answer and help with any questions that you have. So I want to thank Chris and Garrett for joining me today. You all did fantastic. You most definitely did, and appreciate it. We're going to have more and more of these. We'll be coming from our Tales from the Cyber Vault right here in our Security Operations Center, which is a bank vault. I'll say that again. It is a bank vault. It's pretty cool. We'll be doing these more and more frequent. And if you have a topic that you'd like for us to discuss or something you want us to cover, please let us know. We'll be glad to go over it. Until then, as we go through the continuums, we're going to continue to present scenarios and stories that will help you protect and defend your organizations. And once again, if there's anything one source can do, I have no doubts that Garrett, Chris, I know I myself, be more than happy to help you and provide whatever consultation, advice, help that we can do for you. So want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you again, Chris and Garrett, for joining us. Stay healthy, stay safe, and talk to you next time. Thank you.